get started. Welcome to the Telugu Saga show.
Thanks for having me.
It's amazing. Let's go ahead and introduce you first. You went to University of Houston. Woohoo!
Yes, I did.
I don't know what your mascot is.
Go
Uh,
Cougs.
Go Cougs. Got it. Got a degree in marketing. Super dope. You're also a poet. You're an actor, a filmmaker. You have your own awesome podcast called NRI, and we'll dig into that more soon. And you have a self-published book called Bashito Sontana, as it translates to linguistic therapy. Krishna, first of all, congrats on the book. And the process of writing a book and publishing is no easy. So diving straight into it, do you want to tell us and the audience what it's about and how you came about writing this good piece?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm really happy that you actually brought up the Telugu title because usually when I'm introducing it to other people, it's not always something that comes up. It's usually like, now if anybody reads Telugu, then they'll see, because the Telugu title is underneath, they'll look at that and they'll go, oh, and then they'll start asking me, is this a Telugu book? And I'm like, nope, absolutely not. So my book, Linguistic Therapy, or Bashito Swantana, is basically a poetry book. So I would probably preface by making it very clear, it is an English poetry book, which incorporates Telugu elements. And I guess if we're going to do the sales pitch version, I'm only going to say what one of my mom's really close friends, and she's almost a second mom to me, also told me. It is a really good, it is amazing if you have a white son or daughter-in-law and that is marrying into a Telugu family, because by the end of it, they will come out 50 Telugu words smarter if they don't enjoy the book for whatever reason.
That's actually a funny way you say that, because when people who are like white or don't know Telugu, if we're introducing them to Telugu, the first thing that people do is like make them watch like the Telugu movies, especially like Bommarilu, because it shows a lot of our Telugu tradition, Telugu, all that. And same thing here with your book, right? It's like someone trying to learn Telugu. Those are like really important words.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, I mean, and it's not, I didn't really have a target audience when I wrote it. It's more so for me, it was out of, so the thing about me is my friend group is actually very, very diverse. So oftentimes when I am trying to, oftentimes I don't want to sound like I don't want to sound like Trevor Noah or anything, but there's kind of this like weird duality of always trying to, play a middleman translator from one culture to another, or whenever somebody mentions something about their culture and then they play the middleman, I always like relate it back to, so it's kind of similar to Telugu in this way. I mean, even when I tell people, oh, we speak, what language is this? It's Telugu. It's like, what's that? I'm like, okay, Tagalog, the Filipino language? Yeah, so switch the last two syllables, you get Telugu. So the book itself came about actually in a very, I would say, in a very kind of, I don't want to say dark period, but it definitely started in a dark period, if that makes sense, for me. And I mean, so the thing is, I've actually tried writing poetry books before, because I have a background in spoken word, and I've seen other poets, eventually publish their own book. So it's like, okay, next step would be for me in this route would be to get a book. And when I tried to, for a while, I mean, I tried to get whatever pieces I had together to see if they, flow well in a book. And the thing about spoken word poetry versus poetry you read in a book is spoken word is more theater based. So it's more performance based. So it's kind of like, okay, so how whenever you watch like a lot of stand-up comedians, they need to be good writers, but they don't necessarily, but the word, the words or what comes out of their mouth on stage is not necessarily something that would always translate well on paper, because a lot of it is centered around the cadence, the pauses, the rhythm, the how they the tonality. So for me, it was a lot of my pieces work. I kind of had the same problem. Now, some pieces they can translate, spoken word pieces can translate both well on stage and in the book. But for me, I was having that dilemma, and then basically, and then yeah. So you guys, I just want to clarify. You both got a chance to read it, right? Or
Yeah, yes.
We did.
okay,
And if you don't mind, just for the audience to be in the same page, would you be able to share one of your short poems or one of the stories?
sure, yeah, I can do that. Is there a favorite
My favorite.
or one that you particularly?
I felt deep with your amama. So if,
Amama? Okay,
yeah.
I can do that one.
Well, Vishal, which one was your favorite?
I'll do both. I'll do one for you and one for Vishal.
I was just hesitant because I didn't want to, say a lot of things from
The book,
the
yeah.
poetry because it's still like a book, right? It was the one about you're talking about divine comfort.
Divine comfort.
You're talking about how divine comfort comes from ultimate sacrifices. So that's something that I felt really nice about.
Okay, yeah. Oh, the Patriarchy poem.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, I'll start with the Amama one. Amama in Telugu literally means mom's mom. My mom's mom is a force that defies nature, met with hardship after hardship, and she still thrives. At a time, she single-handedly raised two fierce daughters, matriarchal in her grit and work ethic. My mom's mom is a force that not only defies nature, but so much more. After all, she is the force that set into motion the nature of my being. And the next one is Pachadi. Pachadi in Telugu means pickle, but ours is exquisite. Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, we gave birth to this divine fermentation, comfort food that takes days and months to make and process. How ironic that one meal of comfort requires this level of hardship, almost like the irony of my parents' immigration story. Divine comforts lie in the ultimate sacrifices. But at the end of the day, in America, I too will always find comfort in my Pachadi. So yeah, and I guess for those who are listening and haven't seen, so the way I formatted the book is I made them anagram poems, which essentially means each line starts with a letter of the word. So I guess if we were to take Vishal or Sai, okay, yeah, I'll do Sai because Sai's shorter. If we were to take Sai, so so the way the poem would be organized is the first letter would start with an S, the next letter would start with an A, and the third letter would start with an I. And that's kind of how I've organized the poems throughout the book. So it's a series of short poems, very easy to read. I would hope. I can only let the audience decide from there.
When you started to write this like poetry, like how long has it taken you to write the entire thing?
So I would say it took like only I want to say like 3 days.
3 days. Okay.
I mean 3 days if we were to like really time it in terms of, like every single hour, maybe. It might actually be like 1 or 2, honestly. I just know like there were a total of four separate days I took to organize the poem, like to both write and organize the poems. So I guess how that started was in 2020. There was a chapter in the book called the COVID situationship. It started with that, and at that time, that was just its own standalone piece. And then, uh, after later in 2021, our poetry slam venues and stuff started opening up again because the pandemic was kind of coming. Well, okay, we're in Texas, so it ended. It ended way back, but some of the places that I frequent, they were actually like waiting before they started opening up again. So when I went, and the venue I go to is called Right About Now. It's basically, it's actually a really big online poetry community, and we do live shows every Wednesday. I'm only like mentioning them because like I feel like that is a big part of where I got to develop my voice. And when I was there, I performed that poem one of the days, and one of our more seasoned poets. So he came up to me, and if you remember, there was a poem like that's about Pandu, and then the next poem's about Pulihora. So it's like he literally is like, I love how you used food. You compared this girl to food, and I'm like, what? I was like, and then he's like, no, the fruit, the puli, the rice, the spices. I'm like, oh, and then it took me a minute. I'm like, oh, no, those are like different things. So he asked if he could see. So I explained to him what I was doing. So he asked if he could take a look, and he was very like well, he really liked the anagram aspect, and he was like, oh, that's usually really hard. Wow, that's incredible. So after that, I was like, huh, what if I did this with more words? So I basically spent the next 2 days just kind of trying to get whatever like those words I can get the poems out. Like some words I've had, like some words I'm like, oh, okay, this would be a good one. Some it was like, no, like some. And then on top of that, I was doing a lot of listening to like older Telugu songs that I used to like, I kind of grew up with, that were like in this like deep backseat of my memory. Like like old, like like the Money Ratnam songs. The I don't know if you know this director Teja, the JM Nuvunin new director, Chitram director songs. And like of course like Bomaralu, and a mix of that and new ones. And I was just like, oh, this is a pretty good word. Maybe I should use that, or that word, or let's try this one. And then after a point, and then before I knew it, and like so like after 2 days, I had like all these poems, and only one of them was organized into, I guess, a section or a chapter, or like only like four or five, like a small set of them were. So the rest I kind of had to figure it out. And and in this process, I kind of took inspiration off of Hassan Minhaj, because I don't know if you guys have seen Homecoming King, but basically that show was formatted, it's like exposition, the Bethany Reed arc, and then everything feeds off of the Bethany Reed arc in Act 3 after the Bethany Reed arc. So for me, it was kind of like, okay, so for me, it kind of just happened to like, play out like, okay, maybe we'll start with these, like, this part will be about exposition, kind of a introduction to Telugu culture, introduction to the language, introduction to.
Krishna, you explained that in the beginning that you were going through hard times,
Sure.
and that's how these poems came about. And thus, you titled it Linguistic Therapy. Has the writing process been a therapeutical process for you during those hard times? Be- because each poem is part of your story in the whole life of Krishna thus far, whether it be situations, whether it be phases, whether it be people. You've actually expanded each poem into how you actually understood, not take them for granted. You explained it thoroughly on what makes them as a whole. Is thinking about them in that certain way and exploring them helped you kind of come back up from those dark times? How did this writing process help play a role?
I'd say it helped a bit in processing, and yeah, it was therapeutic, but I also want to make it very clear, it was not a substitution for therapy. Like, I was seeing a therapist alongside doing this, because I mean, and I only say this because I know, like, I have other artist friends and other people I know that, or different people, like, who feel like, oh, like they find something that's therapeutic, and that is a healthy, like, that's a healthier coping mechanism, and they start, and it can be and even the healthiest of coping mechanisms can be taken to an unhealthy place if you start operating under the assumption that, oh, this is a substitution for professional help when you do need it. So in my case, yeah, I would say that it definitely helped. And some of the lessons I even like, like one of the chapters, grief is not a linear process. The reason I titled it that is because that was something my therapist used to tell me, like repeated, like, tell me repeatedly. Um, and it was like, and the reason I started going, so I guess was I mean, like I was going through a series of grief of sorts because like my grandfather had just died at the time. And then and then as one of the chapters suggests, yeah, like I had something else come to an end. So it was a mix up. It was like my brain started like, randomly processing two incidents at the same time without realizing it. And I mean, yeah, it's definitely helped. And I'm proud of it regardless of like I'm proud of it, because it's a very interesting, it's kind of like a, yeah, I mean, how do I put this? So another interesting fact was before I wrote this book, I was actually in a period where I was getting heavily triggered and not in a good way by Telugu thing, culture, words, and food and everything. And this book, in a way, it kind of helped me reclaim that, like, flip the script a bit, if you will, of that time period, in that time period. And it was kind of and it was kind of like this very yeah, it was a release of sorts, but it was also kind of like an exploration for me and myself, like, of like, okay, where do I stand on things? Like, no, like, because when you're going through things, one thing I've noticed, at least, you'll have friends, you'll have family, you'll have people of all sorts in your lives giving you all sorts of advice, and it's usually well intentioned, but oftentimes it's mixed with either their own biases, their own perspectives, or and often and sometimes even their own hidden agendas, so for me it was like a process of just like stepping away from everything and trying to identify, you know where I stood, what was like, what was it like, what do I feel about things, and also learn, not just finding myself but also learning to recreate, reinvent myself or figure out, okay, what type of person do I want to be moving forward, and like what changes do I want to make in my character, in my personality, the way I've lived my life and character and whatnot, and whether those changes are good or bad, I would say that, I mean, that ultimately depends on, what your perspective is. Like it's not from like I'm by nature don't like to judge, so it's like, I'll leave it to the audience to decide.
Thanks, man. I know that took a lot out of you, and how I see this book is a way for you to express how you felt during those times, and these topics um, can be walked through every one of us, and it reminds us to write them down and process it by writing it instead of keeping everything in your mind. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, to add to that, right? Like there's so many things that are happening. Like example, like today you might be doing 100 different things, right? But and that too related to work. And you don't actually get to do that self-reflection. And like you mentioned, something, two incidents that happen in your life, you know, they're coming together, right? It's affecting you some way. And I feel like this was a great way to kind of self-reflect, figure out who you are, what you're doing, and what's happened to you so far. And you can grow from it. And I sincerely see that, because while reading those Telugu words, even though I use those Telugu words on a daily basis, they're really, popular words that you would use on a daily basis. Yet I haven't really thought about it, right? Like example, pachadi. That's something that we talk about every day at breakfast. When we talk about amuma, that's they're very important to us too, right? Especially being a family member. How you broke it down and hoping audience get to actually go and check this out. But the way you just wrote it down was just amazing. So just wanted to add to that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's
Thank
the
you.
word I was looking for, self-reflection. And for pachadi, yeah, we eat it, we love it, but we usually don't see what goes behind the scenes. That's the other
Yeah.
fact.
No, I mean, I've always found it to be a very fascinating process. And actually, that's another interesting thing that happened
Did you
during the
make
pandemic.
one yourself?
My mom actually my mom actually got a recipe from one of our family friends, their mom, or like her friend, her one of her best friend's mother. So we were actually so we made so like I got to watch her make it at home, and it was like a days long process. And it's like, whenever, I mean, for us it's like what karapuri, pachadi, like things like that. Those are things that it's like, oh, okay, it's like comfort food. We don't really, we're just like, oh, okay, like I don't really, like, for me, at least for me personally, yeah, it's a comfort food thing. It's like, okay, I'm tired, I don't want to think about cooking, I'll just, like, grab the pachadi, grab some rice, let's do this.
That's it.
Yeah, yeah, like,
And some pereganam or nei.
I
No,
mean,
you should
I
go.
prefer to eat it without nate.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah,
You're the spicy
I
guy.
treated it like an extreme sport over here. But except for mudapapu, when there's mudapapu mardika patri, then you have to have the nate. That's because it's like mudapapu has to go, the nate has to be with the papu. But yeah, otherwise I try to treat it like an extreme sport. And but yeah, so that was another, I think, like, for me, that's where that kind of came in, because it's, yeah, I didn't really, I mean, it was when I was like also kind of helping her too that I realized, like, dang, we really take something like this, that's this complicated, and, like, that requires so much patience, time, focus, energy, for granted. I mean, because, and it's not just that, I mean, it's like, I feel like that's a common thing in, like, all Asian cuisine, like whether it's ramen I know is another process that takes a really long time to make. That's like, like, almost, at least, I don't know if it's actually I mean, I don't want to culturally mistake myself. It feels like a comfort food, at least for me, when I eat it.
No, I was reflecting beyond that too, right? When you say um using those words, coming back to that about divine comforts come from ultimate sacrifices. It's kind of like when someone is doing really well in their life, right? And when you see them getting promoted, becoming a manager or senior manager, whatever they were wanting to achieve, I don't think there are people out there who see like how much effort they put, right? It's the same thing. Like if you want to get up to that standard, if you want to get up to that level, there's a lot of sacrifices you got to make in order to get to that level. So I was kind of thinking about that while I was reading that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's definitely a part of it too. And it's also like, I mean, again, it's like, a lot of people think like, oh, okay, seeing a therapist or going through the therapy process once you start getting professional help is easy, but it's, in a lot of ways, that's actually, I would say it gets harder afterwards, because that's when you really have to, that's when you, like, it's almost like there's a you kind, in a way, you start reaching this point of no return. I don't want to say, well, I mean, you can always return away, but but I feel like, at least for me, it's like, it felt like I don't want to okay, I don't know, you guys have seen Kartikeya too, right? The movie.
I have not.
I've seen it.
Okay, so you know how at the very end he's like, there is, like, Lord Krishna before the Sandipani, and then after the Sandipani, there are two different people.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
that's kind of how I feel about my therapy journey. It's like there is a Krishna Narra before therapy, there's Krishna Narra after therapy. They're both not the same. It's kind of like this weird. So it's like, but it's like, to do that, it's kind of like to go through like a process of growth. In a way, you kind of have to like, let go of certain aspects of yourself, certain things that you've like maybe held true for so long, and understand, like, and learn to like let go of things that just no longer serve you. um so, but it's really hard whenever it's something that you've grown, it's really hard, whether it's when it's like things you've grown up with, whether it's like a belief system or an idea of how the world's supposed to work. And or just like a sense of, um I mean, or just like, or like, like one thing simple for me, like in what's it called, boundary setting, that was something that like for me required a lot of sacrifice, because I'm so used to being the person that accommodates everyone, and learning to say no, I can't accommodate this, this isn't fair for me, or learning to say, like, stand up for myself at another level that I've never done before, was actually something that I would say took, I would say it took me a really long time. Like, it took, in a way, it took a lot of sacrifices, because before, you don't, when you behave a certain way, everybody is happy, they're all happy with you. But then it's like when you start saying no, or when you start asserting yourself in certain spaces that you haven't before, or when you start being more unfiltered and unhinged in some cases, because then it turns into like, okay, now I need to like filter out who's actually going to be by my side after they see this aspect of me. Like, that's a sacrifice. But then on the other side of that, it's the people that do stay, you learn to like cherish them. You learn to like, take a more for to be more what's it called, grateful for them. And also, because your energy is not so scattered or so spread out, you have more to give for the people in your life that actually do matter. And yeah, that's kind of another, like, at least that's kind of another way I was trying to go about it. But
Yeah, there's this Telugu actor that mentions everyone goes out to the gym and builds their muscles, but the muscle that's most important to grow is your courage. And in a culture where you have to show respect and be humble, I think it's hard to build in your own terms. I think therapy for me has helped in a way as well. Um, and hey, from here on out, it's up and going. So
yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. So coming back to the book, Krishna, not only have you managed to pick topics that have been close to you, and the choice of words that you have put into each poem, you also managed to add on a visual representation of how it looks like, either it, either a car riding down the hill, or like a part of your journey that's related to the poem. How was that? How has that been important to you to incorporate it into this whole book?
I can only take the tiniest amount of credit for that, and like all the credit goes to my illustrator and cover artist, Lekia Belamkonda. She was my illustrator, and she was also, like, from the of Telugu descent. Well, I mean, she's, yeah, her family. I don't want to say it like that. That sounds like her ancestors were somewhere back in her ancestors' time, but it's like, no, like her family. She's she's Telugu herself. Um, so yeah, she hand did all the illustrations herself, whether they were acrylics, color pencil, or various different forms. And yeah, I think I mean, so the yeah, like the ideas, I guess, I would say it was a fairly collaborative process. It took this actually, the illustration part is what took much longer than the writing part, believe it or not, because one, when I first stepped into this, I was using my filmmaker YouTube thumbnail brain in deciding what the images would look like. That's what my brain was just so hard, like so used to thinking in. And I might, yeah, the first, I don't even want to show what the original title page was supposed to look like, because I'm looking back at it now. I'm like, I don't even know why I was thinking that was a good idea, but because like I was thinking from a movie poster perspective. And yeah, so for me, so like for that, like it was a lot of patience on their end too, having to, like, let me figure out actually what I wanted, and then working with me to get that right. For some of them, I had images that they were able to, like the car one, that was actually from a family, like an old like photo of are of the neighborhood that my mom, like my dad grew up in. And it's not just that, my mom and dad actually met in that neighborhood too. Like when my grandmother, my mom, and my amama took my, like, moved with my mom and her and my pinny. So it was kind of like a very, like, it was kind of like a very, I just felt like it was like the perfect origin story esque photo. And it was also a special thing for me because, like, before the pandemic, the India visit before, that was actually like the visit where, so I've been down this road many times. I've, we have family that lives there. We go there like almost all the time. But it was like it felt very new the last time we went, because this time, like, my mom and dad were explaining, like, oh, like, this is where we used to do this. This is where we used to do that. And then
That's
I
so
was like,
cute.
oh yeah, you see that bus stop over there? Yeah, that's where your dad used to check me out. And I'm like, I'm like, wait. And then he's like, whoa, 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 I'm not a creeper, man. I'm just like,
I'm glad those don't only happen in movies.
no. No, there's it was legit a movie. It was a legit a Telugu movie of some kind. But I wouldn't say, like, but yeah, I would definitely, but it's like I also would very much caution people to not assume that that is what everyone's real life is, because real life is very, very different. um but yeah, so the images, so for that, and then also, yeah, there was actually, I actually had a small team because it wasn't just them two. I also had two other friends. One friend, her name was Fate, so she's actually, she's an illustrator herself. And like, and the reason, I mean, but it was important for me that I had a Telugu illustrator, because like, it's just so hard to explain, like, the culture. Well, it's not that it's so hard to explain. It's more so, it has more to do with culture than anything else, because kind of like how, Steven Spielberg directed Schindler's List, and Martin Scorsese directed Goodfellas. Now, if you were to switch the directors, make Martin Scorsese direct Goodfellas and Steven Spielberg direct Schindler's List, I'm sure either one of them would have done a good job, but it would, but there's a very different touch, because Steven Spielberg has a cultural attachment to Schindler's List, whereas Martin Scorsese had a cultural history and attachment to Goodfellas. So there were nuances that, like, each director for both of their films were able to get, that somebody else directing just would not be able to. So that's why it was important for me to, like, make sure I had a Telugu illustrator. But my friend Faith was really helpful, because she was very instrumental in me understanding, okay, are my demands, like, reasonable? Are they not reasonable? Like, because my job is easy. I'm like, oh, this looks cool, let's do this. Okay, no, 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 let's do that, let's do that. It's like, it's them who has to, like, at the end of the day, make it come to work, come to life. So yeah, but like, I cannot thank Lakia and Sika enough for their work, for the amount that they put in of dedication, time, and, like, effort they put in. And also, I mean, if you don't mind, I would actually like to shout out. So I just found out recently that Sika, the person who did the cover art for my book, she's actually accepting commissions at this time. If anybody who is listening is looking for a commissioned artist for graphic design, I mean,
When you say commissions, explain that.
I mean, I can give you her Instagram and you guys can ask her yourself, but I want to say, I think it's mostly like graphic design work. So she's
Okay.
like, it's like she's freelancing, I guess, her
Got
services
it.
now.
Got it. Yeah, no,
So
the
if you guys
title that
want,
you
like,
just showed, whoever's listening through audio, it's a great cover. It's a Nemoli pen, right? Is that how they say it?
yeah, that's kind of what I want. I mean, yeah, instead of
Is that
feather
the
pen, I
old
made it in.
feather pen? Got it.
Yeah, it
Is
was this
that the
feather pen concept.
old way of uh, writing utensil? Is that what's the significance between using an Emily?
So
I know it's pretty common.
no, 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 no. So at first I was thinking more so, well, like, I mean, I write one because, like, a peacock feather is very, or peacock feathers have a very big spiritual and, cultural significance for us, especially given Krishna, Krishna and the peacock feather. And it was kind of at the time, and it's kind of weird because this was written, I wrote this at a time where I still believed in God. But in a way, this was kind of like at the time, it was kind of like a me asking for like me asking for God's blessing. Um, Again, this was in a period where I believed in God, like where I was actually still religious, but it was a bit of that, and it was also because, so another thing I thought, like another thing I was like, this idea came very suddenly, but if you also look very closely, where the feather pen is supposed to be, it spells out the Telugu word, the Bashata Swantana in English. I don't know if you guys can see it.
Yeah.
And then what I wanted were like, some of the words coming off on the strands, like the Telugu words, um, coming off on the Nemli feather strands. And yeah, it was just kind of, it was that. And it's also like, I don't know, I've always found peacock feathers to be like a very calming presence. So, and that mixed with the fact that like, and that mixed with the fact that like, and of course like the whole pen concept, it's like, like that's kind of the, I mean, it's kind of like a, like if you're a soldier, you take a sword, you take your weapon into battle. Like for me, my pen, like in this book, as far as this book is considered, my pen is essentially my weapon. I use that in quotes.
There's just so much, like just within the cover page, right? Like the title page right there. Um, there's just so much meaning. I wanted to ask, when you actually showed this out to, uh, I think family members or friends, what was like your best compliment that you got?
So I actually, for me, it was like, I think for me, the best compliment was, so in growing up, we, in our temple class, we actually had Telugu classes. That's where I learned how to read and write. And at the time, the teacher, or to my teacher, so I was kind of her favorite. No, not I was kind of, I was very much her favorite student. I'm not gonna,
I
I was
wonder
very
why.
much her favorite student. And and so like, and like I was so much so her favorite student because like that she even recruited my mom to teach Telugu there. And eventually they both like, ended up becoming like actual teachers of the organization. But this auntie, she basically became a second mom to me. And it's so like, in more ways than I can say. Um, so like, even like, even in terms of career advice, or like job internships and stuff, like she used to always, she used to help me out and try to guide me, or like, it's being like, oh, maybe you should get the certification too. And I remember when she finally read the book, she was like, she was like, I think it was more, it meant the most when I heard it from her, because like for me, learning Telugu started in her class. Like I wouldn't say like learning Telugu started in her class, but like, I feel like that's where I like, for the first time I actually got to explore my interest of learning Telugu. Because like for me, I was very interested. I remember at that time I was adamant that like I joined because I really wanted to learn how to read and write. And that was mainly because like, when we were watching movies, like the title, like like my mom would be like, oh, this person's in the movie, that person's in the movie. I'm like, how do you know? It's like, it's written, or it's like their titles are in Telugu. So I couldn't. So I'm like, okay, I want to be able to do that too one day. And but yeah, it was and also like from there, that was also my first time I started to like, even get introduced to Telugu poetry at all. While I never exactly like, went down that pathway, I feel like it kind of, like, it actually like, it's a very like, it's felt like a very full circle moment, for her, because it's kind of like when they're teaching Telugu, it's like they just like, most they think what happens is, okay, they'll know how to read and write, and they can, like, it's not like they don't like, it's not like they I mean, these are all people, volunteers essentially teaching. It's out of the hope of like, okay, we're able to preserve our language for our kids, and they're able to like, understand and appreciate the culture enough. Not so, it's not like they're expecting anyone to come out a scholar or anything of sorts. And I'm not calling myself a scholar by any means, but it's a very, I mean, I could like, it's a very, it felt very nice to see like, see the pride in her eyes and her voice.
Totally, yeah. She can be teaching you guys this, and there's probably tests that you can take, but she probably felt most proud is what did you do after you have taken her class? You
Yeah.
took it above and beyond by writing an actual book. So, is she the person that you said she proofread and kind of helped you? Um,
So my no, so I did not have her involved in the process because I wanted to be a surprise.
Imagine
No, because
all
I
the red
wanted to be
marks.
a surprise for her. So I was like,
Got it.
oh, so
Okay.
like that's the main reason. But yeah, no, oh my God, I'm thinking about her looking over my grammar mistake, my spelling mistakes, and being like, what you still don't know? No, the thought, you know how we have a two thought, the thought and thought, like the thought and like the one where you fold your tongue,
T
ta,
yeah,
ta.
TA and THA.
No, the ta and the ta that you fold your tongue in,
Oh, okay.
like that I used to that used that and da, like those used to get me stumped for the longest time, and to this day I find it very easy to use put the wrong one in the wrong the wrong letters. So I'm already imagining her looking over this being like, what, you still don't know the difference after all these years. But no, so my atta, my dad's sister, is actually the one who proofread the words. Dad and my mom, her and my mom, later at the very end, where I'm like, nothing's like, and it kind of got awkward whenever they proofread, and then it was like, oh, okay, I spelled the word, like, or like my mom would be like, no, the English spelling is wrong, so you got to fix that. Because that all of a sudden that changes the entire poem. Because if it's like, oh, if you spell it one way, and then they're like, no, you're supposed, like, it's not supposed to be an e, it's supposed to be an I or something else, all of a sudden that entire line changes, or sometimes two or three lines, depending on how it goes.
There were some words used or sentences that came out raw. So how did your family relatives react to that?
I mean, I've been blessed to come from a very understanding and supportive family, in that, at least, I mean, don't get me wrong, we've had our tensions, but after a certain age, I feel like we've gotten to a point, like, there's like this mutual respect of like, okay, our like, my parents are very understanding, like, the world they grew up in, and the world they went through is very different from the world that I'm going to have to be navigating. Like, they're very understanding of that, and that it doesn't make sense to expect me to navigate the world the way they navigated theirs, because we are living in, I don't want to say we're living in two completely different worlds, but it's like, it just, like, there's just, it's like, there are just so many different parameters and factors in both our journeys. So I mean, for me, it was like, most of my family members were actually, they, at least, like, as far as I know, were very thrilled and happy to see it. My parents were also very proud and happy. Uh I'd say the least enthusiastic was my brother, because I used to make him, because he lives in Dallas, right? And Dallas, as you already know, is like Telugu, Telugu Central.
Is it
It's practically like, it's, yeah, it's like Dallas and I guess the Bay Area. I mean, they have multiple Telugu events, so I used to constantly be like, "Yo, let me know when this event, like, let me know if there's this event, what event's going on, what events, this event or that event, or here, take some books, go here, go there." And he's like, "No, I can't do any of this." So for him, it's like
is your older brother or younger brother?
younger brother,
Okay.
younger brother, but he very much behaves and looks like he's older than me. So um, but yeah, so that, I would say, I mean, and it's kind of, I mean, it's kind of like I'm not going to say, like, like my parents, I guess, would agree with everything and that I wrote in my book, but there's also an understanding of like, okay, this is his perspective, his story. And as far as I mean, and as far as I try my best to be like, respectful of them, and have like, make sure there is like, for whoever's reading, like, these are my thoughts and mine alone. Like, this is my voice. So
Thank you, man.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. For everyone, again, when I was reading through these poems, it felt as a way that, oh, this is how this person thought. Hey, I also felt similarly, but I didn't fully take time to finish my own thoughts about it. So it can be read through anyone, everyone. I think it's beautifully put together. Um, Krishna, do you have another book coming out? Are you in the works?
Right now I'm actually in the middle of moving, and I do have a short film in pre-production at the moment that's been getting delayed a bit, so we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, that's a great
But
segue, by the way. How let's talk about your acting and filmmaking.
sure. So yeah, so my first love and passion has always been acting and filmmaking. And that's actually where my storytelling interest even came from. Believe it or not, I actually used to hate reading books when I was little. Like from yeah, up until like the end of high school, up until college, I was like I had like a massive like a massive like disgust towards books. But I always loved movies, um and yeah, like and so for me that's where my interest started, and acting especially. And I make YouTube, and I used to make YouTube videos, and because I was making YouTube videos, that's how I learned to script, to edit, to direct, to camera angles, lighting, and things like at a basic level. And then um I would say like maybe 2019, 2020, 2021ish was when I was actually like getting to shadow, like, or at least like whatever parts I could, was where I was actually getting to shadow, and I was trying to pursue it more full time for that period before I realized that, okay, if I want to make the projects I want to make, I'm going to need to I'm going to need more capital, which essentially led me back to going 9 to 5 9 to 5. But it's like, but like what I would say, what a more intentional, like clear understanding of, okay, what my pathway would be in this route. So I used to have it, so the YouTube channel I used to have, I haven't posted in over a year, and honestly I don't know when I'm going to post again. So I'm a little reluctant to share, but I mean, I don't mind if people want to check it out. It's called Krish TV. The last video I made was literally a parody of, have you guys heard of the movie To All the Boys I Loved Before?
Nope.
The one with the girl who writes the letters to all these, like, to like all her crushes, and the letters get leaked, but it's like because she wanted it to be for herself.
Mm.
I made like a gender flip version of that, like a parody of that. And yeah, so that was the last thing I did. And after that, it kind of, yeah, after, and then after that, I had to, like, I realized I wanted to start focusing on bigger projects, or getting like making bigger projects, so maybe going the festival route, or even if I ever did come back to YouTube, something kind of like something which is more, I guess, I don't want to say like, yeah, more with more like more longer form content, essentially. um but I'd say apart from that, right now I'm mostly just kind of, I'm mostly just taking things like one day at a time and figuring it out. I do have a, like, I do have things that I'm trying to play around with, but again, it's a, at the moment everything is very beginning stages. So, and it's like, it's kind of like, that's the thing, like it's kind of like, for like, what when you go from project, you work on one project, you finish it, then the next project you're back at the beginning. It's like, I mean, sure, it might, like, in enough personal experience, sometimes it gets easier, sometimes it gets harder, but I mean, even for me, like, if even if I were to make, like, for my next book, if I were to make it, I would want it to have like the same freshness that I felt like I had in the first one. So we'd have to see
Yeah,
what comes.
if writing is one form of way of expressing, has you being in front of camera and living through those expressions, has that been another therapeutical process for you?
Yeah, I mean, that's always been a therapeutical process for me, being acting. I would say, even before, I would say honestly, it's kind of like, I mean, for me, all these other art forms, I feel like they came as a way initially to better the actor with it. I mean, okay, I'm kind of, it's very similar to a quote that Sidhu Jarnalagunda, DJ Tilu, said in an interview once. He's like, because if you know, he also writes his scripts and he acts and he kind of does a little bit of everything. So when I so like he says all these other roles and talents came out to sustain the actor within me, and that's kind of I and that resonated with me because that's how it very much started for me. But I would also say, like, along the way, I've learned to admire and like develop a new. It's very I mean I'd say, like, for any creatives out there that are aspiring, it's definitely always a good idea to dabble in more than just one art form, or at least try other art forms out, or try other aspects. Like, if you're an actor, I would very much encourage you to also, like, learn BTS, like, behind the scenes work as well, because like all the skills you learn there, they'll indirectly help you as an actor. Not only that, you get a better idea on you get a better understanding for what other people need from you as an actor, or what are things that you like. You get a better understanding of what the market, like, one, what the market has, what's in the market. Two, two, what steps you're going to have to take, what challenges, and how can you position yourself. And you also get an understanding of, like, how people think, how to work with other people. And also, it really, I mean, it honestly just, like, it really, it's like each I feel like each art form, like, it inspires and instructs another in its own way. Like, you know Jordan Peele was a stand-up comedian and, like, a really successful comic. But then when he and that was like and he says, like, that was very crucial for him. That experience was very, very helpful for him when he was putting together his horror movies like Get Out, Us, and Nope, because in that time he learned how to, like, really get in sync and understand what the audience pulse is. And because he knew how to, like, evoke laughter out of him whenever he wanted him to, it's not much of a it's very easy to, like, evoke other emotions as well. So definitely, like, having yeah I would definitely say, like, that's kind of, like, what's helped me. It also could be because I'm very ADD, so.
Was there anyone you followed closely in terms of learning about filmmaking? You mentioned something about shadowing as well.
Yeah, so there were other filmmakers in our community that I followed. Like, one was this one guy named Harsh Mahadeshwar. He's a DP, and, like, so interestingly, when I was shadowing him, he had just quit his full-time job because he was actually at a point where he was able to sustain himself from, like, him and his family from his filmmaking career. Like, it had reached that point. And for me, there was a period, so, like, I assisted him on a few music videos and shorts and skits and stuff. And for me, that was really crucial because it taught me organizational skills that you would need when you're producing a project or filmmaking, like how to properly shot list things out, how to like how to storyboard effectively in a way that, like, that whenever you do have a DP or someone else, like, that you can instruct them. And in a way, it also, like, satisfied, like, certain aspects of my curiosity when it came to filmmaking enough to where I was like, okay, my curiosity here is settled. I don't need to, like, now I'm going to focus my energy more on these other things. And I mean, yeah, like, I always knew, like, I wanted to be an actor, and I was like, I knew I was, like, writing, but there was a part of me that thought, oh, I might enjoy directing too, and I did for a time period. But I also came to realize, but I'm also, like, starting to real, but I'm also reached a point in my where I realized I don't enjoy it enough as much as, a lot of, like, other passionate directors I met do. And but I do enjoy these as much as they enjoy directing, if not more. And I guess in some ways I guess in some ways it also it all it def I would say, yeah. And it's not just him. I mean, I've shadowed other create like other other people. So essentially the people I've shadowed, I would say were people who were at least 2 or 3 steps ahead of me. Because when you shadow, because if you, even if, because the thing about, so now, I mean, yeah, like obviously if we can like, if anybody could shadow like the biggest actor or the biggest, writer, director or whatever, like, yeah, like, by all means take it. But it's very, I find it much more effective. Me personally, I found it much more effective when you try to like work with somebody who's past the next 2 or 3 steps you have to pass, because they know, one, they're closer to just having passed that, so their guidance is a lot more applicable. Like what Will Smith did to get to where he got to, the journey he had to go through is much more different than the journey I would have to go through, or any other actor who's made it in recent times, like Simu Liu had to go through, I guess. Like they both have like very wildly different journeys. They have like they're both with a lot of struggle. I mean, they've both had to work immensely hard. They've had to make a lot of sacrifices, but like they're like, there are very different journeys. Like what Simu Liu had at his disposal, Will Smith did not have, and what Will Smith had, Simu Liu did not have. And it eventually, and it's a lot of it is, and like also the landscape was very different. So I would say it always helps to have like somebody a couple steps ahead of you. And even for the poetry book, that helped too, because the community I was in, so it's a very big community. There are people who are, it ranges from like poets who are actually full-time, their full-time job is going to like open mics and events and performing like as a feature. Like they'll have like a 15-20 minute set, like they perform as a feature, they get paid to do that and like sell their books, like they're making enough to like where they're making a full-time career, paying off their student loans. And then there are people like who just do it like occasionally for fun. It ranges from in all range, like all different levels. So for me, that was helpful because I got to see people, because like there was like a like you get a level of guidance, that I got a level of guidance that range from like very like from people who were closer to where I was, or also it was like, oh, maybe this step is way too far back, but who you might be better off talking to, this person, they just figured this out. And now it's like, so I would say that was very helpful for me along my journey thus far. So
Definitely, I think it's a great way to learn, and that is true on not just in this like filmmaking like path, right? If I'm going to be like if I want to get to where I like want to be, and there is someone that's already there and they're a couple steps ahead of me, I would definitely want to go and pick their brain a little bit and kind of talk to them and see what they're doing on a daily basis. So I think it's a great thing you bring up. So thank you for that. Krishna, it's been good talking to you about your journey here. Just a recap of your linguistic therapy. I'm very bad at saying these Telugu names, so
it's total. My Telugu is really bad too. I have the Varun Sandesh Telugu. It's all good.
No.
I have the Varun Sandesh Telugu. I did not get the
You did not pull that card. Oh my god. Well, I'll go to the teacher that you have.
So it's called Bashato Swantana. Am I saying it right?
Yes.
What's your rating on that?
Amazon, you're better off typing in linguistic therapy. That's what's going to end up. I'm just saying.
You have a variety of talents. You have a book. You write. You're a poet. You're acting, getting into filmmaking, and so I think it's a great podcast episode that we had. The book that you had a lot of self-reflection, and anybody reading it will obviously get to know Krishna a little bit more. And it's something that I think we all get to sit down, read it, and kind of go through our own thoughts about not just like, okay, this particular word, right? There's a bigger meaning to it. And so I think it's a great way to learn and grow. So with that, Krishna, thank you so much. And I'm gonna say thank you to the audience, and then we're gonna do like our fun segment, quick fun segment.
All right, yeah. Yeah, I was just gonna say thank you very much for having me. I will say, as an independent author, first time independent author, it's been quite I'm still really figuring out how to better promote, and like, even though my background's in marketing, like, how to better promote and how to, like, finding the right spaces to share this piece in. So like, I'm really grateful for anyone that has me on and lets me do it. And yeah, I mean, I also thank your listeners for making it this far. If they have, like, whoever has, if any of my jokes scared any of y'all away, all I can say is there aren't, I don't think they're we have that much of that content in the book. That being said, if you do like my cringy jokes, you can head right over to my YouTube channel. I got something for every.
Man, you're a marketing guru. Krishna, I also want to thank you. I think what I learned today the most is that when we're going through situations in life, this has been a great reminder to not only not hide from it, but try to ease into it, explore what it means to you, what it defines you, and find your art form. Well, I know you mentioned a lot of art forms. You have dwelled into a lot of them already, but find the one that's easiest to you. Start on it. Find your way of expressing. Um, get to know your own story a little bit more better. I know some of us are hide from our own selves just because of the standards that has been put by the society. So don't be afraid. Like Krishna said, build your courage. Yeah, thanks for your time, Krishna.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you coming on, Krishna, and just want to say thank you to the audience who always been supportive of us. Another great episode, guys, and to this episode we will link Krishna's social media, link to the linguistic therapy through Amazon, and yeah, so definitely hope you enjoy the episode, and signing off.
Ooh, can I say one last thing real quick?
Yeah.
Christmas is coming up. So Christmas is coming up, and this is a great gift. I think it's a great gift. Just gently reminding people. It's a gentle reminder.
Well, make sure to add that. So